All right, it starts with Tiritus, the Spartan poet, wrote, "Stand straight in the front rank with your shield before you, and see your life as your enemy. The darkness of death should be welcome as the light of the sun." Now, in my book, only about 60 people die, so it may not be as hard as some of these guys, but okay. Frank Kane was dying. He was wounded to pieces. At 6 feet 4 inches and close to 240 hard-muscled pounds, that took some doing. He tried to prop himself up against the tree, but found his legs weren't working anymore. He stared down at his blood-soaked shirt. The bullet holes were barely noticeable now, just small, innocent-looking punctures. They seemed to have stopped bleeding. The blood still seeped steadily from the knife wound in his abdomen. He pressed harder with his right hand, trying to slow the bleeding. A thick pink loop of intestine slipped out between his fingers, and he carefully tucked it back inside. His thin leather gloves were stiff with blood. He had meant to discard them after the wet work like always. Now it didn't really matter. He looked over at the motorcycle. It was a BMW, one of the 1200 series, painted a deep, metallic ocean blue. His drying blood had stained the gas tank and sides with long, dark streaks. It was a sweet ride, 1200 cc's. The bitch was super fast, that was for sure. He didn't know how far he had gotten before the tank finally ran out, but then it wasn't his bike. It belonged to Spanish Johnny. It was the first one Frank had found outside the safe house with the keys still in the switch. Spanish Johnny, now there was a piece of work. Frank wondered what Spanish meant when he whispered, "for Aphrodite." It was hard to know with Spanish Johnny. God, he felt tired, exhausted. Frank wanted to close his eyes and sleep, maybe for 1,000 years. He was beyond pain now. His body felt numb, somehow dulled, even a little cold. He knew his body was going into shock. At least it didn't hurt anymore. Well, just a little. The Spartans had enjoyed a good run. For 9 years, they had been the most powerful motorcycle gang on the East Coast. 9 years of taking names and kicking ass. They were so small when they started, no one even noticed them. Cyrus had named them. He had taught them, showed them the way. His vision had guided them. He had made them strong, relentless, feared. Like a modern-day Lycurgus, he had molded them on the design of ancient Sparta. At their peak, no one dared to oppose them. They worked with impunity, even filling the niches for the big boys in organized crime. It couldn't last. They'd known that from the start. It was all over now. Their strength had doomed them. The government brought massive pressure from the FBI, ATF, DEA, and all the alphabet boys. Other East Coast bike gangs were tempted to try and reclaim their old turf. West Coast gangs moved in, probing for weaknesses so they could expand their own territories. The Spartans started to lose control of their affiliates, helots, as Cyrus liked to call them, who began to revolt, attacked, infiltrated, betrayed. That was what happened in Greece to the ancient Spartans too. Frank knew Cyrus was dead. He had to be. Otherwise, they never would have had the balls to try to burn Frank. Frank was the Spartans' chief enforcer. Too bad he was dying, he thought. There's a lot left undone. The hitters would be coming for him again soon. They had to. You couldn't leave a man like the Hammer alive. It'd be suicidal. He heard the engine off in the distance. Sounded like a truck, old, maybe a Ford 250. Probably 4 cleaners, maybe 5 counting the driver. He would have sent 5, just to be safe. Make damn sure he was down for good. Make sure Frank Kane never came back to haunt them. He dumped his twin Colt 45s at the scene. He still had a gun in his boot. It was a double-barreled Derringer. He carried a couple of 44 Magnum rounds in the pipes. The gun wouldn't save him, but it sent a couple of them to Hades before him. He tried to reach it. His left arm didn't seem to have any strength in it. He concentrated for 10 seconds, forging the will. He tried to extend the left hand toward the boot again. The fingers stretched and the hand trembled, but the arm wouldn't move at all. Frank sighed and leaned his head back against the tree. He gazed up into the bare branches. The sky overhead was clear and blue and pitiless, just like his eyes. His long dark hair blew back in the cool breeze. He would liked to have seen the ocean one more time, smell the salt air, Listen to the roar of the waves as they broke on the shore. Drink a last cold beer with the sun warm on his face. He pushed his swollen tongue over his lips and tasted the blood caked in his beard. It tasted like he had a mouthful of new copper pennies. Damn, there was a lot of payback out there needing to be done, and he wasn't going to make it. He closed his eyes and imagined himself like Odysseus, adrift in a hollow ship on the restless back of the wine-dark sea. He heard the truck closing in, heard it skid to a stop before him. A gentle breath of wind brushed his cheek. Frank wasn't afraid. Death reached out then and took him. He was the last Spartan.
That's all I have. So if you like Paul, you'll like Spartans.